Hey YouTubers, today we have an LE washing machine. This is actually the washer dryer, but it's going to be similar for the washing machine. It's got the LE error. So the OE and the LE are very common errors. The OE pertains to the drain problem, usually the drain motor. The LE is called a locked rotor, and in the back of the washer there's a big motor. There's a big thing that spins called the rotor, and it means that the computer thinks that the rotor isn't moving. So there's a sensor back there called a Hall sensor, or a rotor position sensor, and it tells the computer what that rotor is doing, how fast it's spinning, if it's moving, if it's not moving, and it's kind of like a tachometer at speed. So if something goes wrong with that system, you'll get an LE error. And there's various reasons it can happen. Usually the Hall sensor, that little thing that senses the rotor position, just needs to be replaced. They're really cheap. We'll put one in the description below, a link for it. But it could be some other reasons too. First thing you could check when you open it up, you could make sure that this silver thing, the spin basket, spins really easily. If you notice that the spin cycle is very loud and there's a lot of thumping and it just gets progressively louder, that may be the reason you're getting the LE error, because the spin basket is loose. The rear bearing that holds it in position is worn out, or the spider bracket that holds it like the legs of a spider, one of the connections is broken. So now the spin basket will wobble around. If you grab the outer part of this, the plastic tub, and then you grab the inner part, the metal part, and you try to rotate the metal part while holding the plastic part, you basically should have no give or no movement. It can spin, but it shouldn't be able to rock. Should feel pretty tight. That means that the rear bearing and the spider bracket are in really good shape. But if you have a lot of play, that means you probably have to replace the spider bracket or the rear bearing. That's so expensive, it's probably better at that point to actually get a new machine, because it's a really pricey thing because of all the labor involved. But it may just mean, if all this is tight, it may just mean that your Hall sensor or rotary position sensor just needs to be replaced, and that's going to be easy to do. Let's show you guys how to do that. So guys, we're at the back of the washer. Make sure you have it unplugged. It's really important. There's a chance of getting shocked. We don't want that to happen. I don't want you guys getting hurt. So make sure it's unplugged. You can turn off the water, or you can remove the water connections here. You can remove the drain to get it out where you have enough room to really see what's going on. You just want to get this plate off by removing 4 Phillips head screws, and then you can get to where the rotor is and the Hall sensor. You just use a Phillips head screw. Okay, now once you get those screws out, there's a couple of clips, 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom. Just grab it, and it's going to bend this whole panel a little bit, but it's okay. Pull out maybe the top one, and then lift off the bottom one. And now you get to this piece, which is the rotor, and you can grab it and turn it by hand. It should turn really smoothly. If you notice like it's rocking, that's not good. That means that spider bracket or the rear bearing or both are messed up, and then it makes more sense to replace the whole washer. So this one spins really good. And to get to where the Hall sensor is, which is right around here, I got to get this rotor off. And to get the rotor off, I got to get this one bolt off right here. Once the bolt's off, I can wiggle this whole thing off. It's kind of in there with some magnetic force, so you have to pull pretty hard as you wiggle to get this off. And one thing we can do to keep this from spinning while we're turning this lefty-loosey, getting this bolt off, is we can get a screwdriver inside these fins. These are cooling fins, but down close to the base where it's going to lock into the plastic, or down here into the base, and then we're going to remove this. So I'll go get the proper socket. We'll give you guys the socket size, and then we'll show you how you can test. Other thing that can happen when you get the LE error, the LE error is pretty bad because if you get it, you don't get spin, you don't get agitation, the motor just doesn't work. It'll fill, it can still drain, but it won't get any motor action. So it could be also that this wire here that sends a signal from the hall sensor to the computer has an internal break. And the internal break will tend to happen right where my finger is. If you look at that part, there is a cable stay that keeps the wire from moving around. And when this moves around a lot during spin, it shakes around. You can see this thing can move. Over time, that can cause an internal break in one of those wires. Sometimes the internal breaks are tricky because you look at the outside coating and it's intact, but inside that metal conductor, the wire itself is moved around to a point where it's like a paper clip. You bend it enough and then it breaks. And if that happens, that sensor can't talk to the computer, which in this case, on this machine, it's down here. And that will cause a problem. That is rare though, but if you replace the rotor sensor and you still have an LE error, you may need to find out if there is a break in the wire. The way I do that is I find the two ends of the wire that I think it might be the suspect, and I put my multi-tester, continuity tester on each side, and you get that beep. If you get the beep, you know the wire is good. But if you put them there and there's no beep, that means that wire is broken, but it's no big deal. You can cut out a section of the wire where you think the break is, which is usually right here, and then you can splice in new wire. Very easy to do. So we're not going to do that today because that's probably not what's going on, but we are going to take off the rotor and we'll take off that hall sensor. Let's do that next. Okay guys, we have a 17mm socket for that bolt. I have a pretty big screwdriver, so we're going to put that in right here. I remember doing this one time and not being on top of my game, and the machine was plugged in. Huge mistake. And when I was holding the screwdriver, it's actually on a Whirlpool, similar but not the same exact washer. I had this down where it was touching the metal conductors, which were energized. They had power going through it. And when I was holding this metal and I had this metal and I touched it, that voltage went through my body, went from this arm to this arm, but across my heart. And that's super dangerous. If you're ever dealing with electricity and you touch it with your finger, it's not good, but you feel a little tingle. It's not going to kill you unless you're wet or something. I wouldn't have you guys try that, but it happens to me a lot. But if you have current going through one arm and then the other arm, because these are both metal tools, not good. So make sure this is unplugged, okay? And then make sure this is not contacting the electrical part, but it's in toward the plastic base, like closer to the middle, not down here, closer to the middle. And that's going to keep that from rotating. Take your socket, and then you can loosen this up. All right, so that loosened up, but it was on there tight. So that had never been taken off. So that's the factory tightness is pretty tight. Lefty loosey, still pretty tight. It's a fairly long bolt. Just take your time. There we go, that's looser. Okay, bolt came off. It has also a big fender washer and a lock washer. There's evidence of a little bit of blue on there. That's the Loctite. So now I'll grab the rotor and I'm going to wiggle it toward me and it is on there with some good magnetic pull, but it'll come off. Just be patient, wiggle, pull. And there's the rotor comes off. Now the rotor has, really cool, it has magnets all around. So this is part of the motor. It's a really good design. It's called the direct drive. Old machines had a motor down here, and then they had a pulley and a belt. But this is a system where it's just goes directly in. So I think it's much better. So we have that. Put that off to the side. And now to get to where the Hall sensor is, you want to get the stator off, and there's going to be these gold ones that you want to spin off. Let's do that next. So to get these off, you want to use a 10 millimeter, a little smaller. These are going to come off a lot easier than that big one we did earlier. So by the way, the LE error could result from this being damaged, the rotor. If you look in, and these little reliefs, these little, they're called splines, little lines in here that fit on the splines of this main shaft. If these are metal, but if these are plastic, and if they're all wiped out, they look like there's not really much lines there anymore, it means that the machine got overloaded. It tried really hard to turn, and the motor turned, this thing turned, but this load didn't turn, and it stripped the plastic. And now the machine doesn't make any sense. The motor says you're turning, or it gives a command to turn, and it doesn't turn. It has the wrong amount of resistance. It causes an error. So that's pretty easy to solve too. You can just get a new one of these rotors. Also, one of these magnets may be cracked or loose. That will cause an LE error. So that's unusual to have these magnets messed up. To have this strip though is pretty common because people overload the machines. And you can get this whole rotor assembly. I think you can also sometimes buy just this plastic insert, and you can take out these bolts, put in a new insert into the metal, and then you've got that taken care of. So we're thinking though that we probably have the classic Hall sensor problem. So we're gonna just spin these off, and then I'll show you the next step. Okay, we got them all out except for this top one. When you put it back in, it's probably best to put the top one in first. I'm gonna support the weight of this. Get the last one out. Pretty long, nice looking screws. So one thing we do want to do before I forgot is we've got to take off this one Phillips head screw here to get this bracket off so we don't put too much strain on this wire. Let me just spin that off real quick. There we go. Get that out of the way. Okay, now I can get this whole rotor toward me. I'm going to set it down. Plug that's bringing power to the rotor, or to the stator. So actually, you know what, on this, you guys, this model does not use the typical Hall sensor. So if you are getting that error, it may be a result of that rotor piece being in trouble. Probably the plastic splines. Or this wire, this one, might have an internal break in it right there, and you just may need to have a new piece of wire spliced in. But if you have the typical LG washing machine, will have another connector like this. This is not a Hall sensor. This is bringing power to the motor. But there'll be another plastic piece about right here, and it's easy just to take off its connector and pry it off and put a new one in, and then put the connector back on. Once you've done that, you just put the stator back into position. So we're going to bring it up, and we're just putting it kind of where it was originally. This is down at an angle at the bottom. We'll feed in a screw at the top. So I have had situations before where I've had to replace the whole stator, but it's unusual. It's usually not the troublemaker. And that back in, we're just putting these in by hand and we'll tighten them up. Okay, all the screws are back in. We're gonna tighten them up though, kind of like how you would tighten the head gasket on a car. So you don't want to just go tighten, 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 tighten like that, but you're gonna go tight, then drop down to the below the one below it, that one, then do the side one, side one, side one, side one. So it's kind of more of an even pressure, even tightening. So I'm getting a little tight, not all the way tight. I'll do the next one. Concept is we want this piece to not be askew. We want it to be nice and flat against the tub. Okay, that's good. Now we're going to take the rotor, put it back on to the splines. So these look really good. These are not messed up. This machine has not been overloaded. But if you notice that those are overloaded, you may need to replace that. I'm going to put this back on. We have to kind of wiggle it on. Wiggle and push. And as you put on the bolt, it'll get tighter and tighter. By the way, let's put on that little stay down there again to hold that cable in place. Put it in position. We'll add that little Phillips head screw. Got it. All right, here is our bolt. Okay, and now we're gonna switch over to the, went from the 10 millimeter to the 17. Pretty easy at first. I'm holding it with my hand. It's interesting when you put this back on, it goes on a lot easier, but when you're taking it off, it fights you because that that compound. So I'm gonna put this back in there to hold it so it won't move while I tighten it. It's good. You get it pretty tight. All right. Okay, that's good. Spin it by hand, make sure it can spin smoothly. And we should be good. So in this model, we didn't have the rotary sensor, the Hall sensor, but we did have the ability to fix these stripped out splines, which could be causing your LE error. And we do have the ability to fix a broken wire, which could cause it. We do have the ability to check those magnets, making sure they're okay. So if you've checked the magnets and they're good, the splines are good, you still get the LE, I would say that then you want to check this wire. If you notice, there's 3 of them. There's a blue, a yellow, and a red. And you have to find the other end of that and then check that too. So it's not that hard to do, guys, because down where my hand is, there's a modular connector. You can separate that right there. That's the end of one of those wires. The other end of that wire was connected, remember, to the stator. So you can just take that modular connector off the stator, and you can put your continuity tester on one side of the blue wire, then the other side of the blue wire, and you should hear a beep, and do it for the yellow wire and then for the red wire. If you don't hear a beep on one of those wires, it's broken, and you can just replace that wire or try to figure out where the break is, which is probably right where my finger is, right here. All right, so now we're just going to put it back together. Got everything tight. Put these little fins down in these slots. We'll go the top ones first, and then we'll put the bottom ones in. That kind of holds it preliminarily, and then you put in the 4 small Phillips head screws. If you call in an expert, you can just do it yourself. Just take you about half an hour. And the parts are really cheap. Got it. And we'll hook up the hoses, we'll hook up our drain, we'll plug it in and turn on the faucets, and then it should have a nice clean run. So thanks so much for watching, and I hope you consider joining our channel. If you are a member of the channel and you have any problem with any appliance, you can contact me as a member anytime by text or by email or a phone call, and I'll be happy to spend some time with you. I can send you diagrams, I can send you videos, I can send you part links, and we'll get your machine going. So thanks again for watching. We'll see you on the next one.